Welcome back. So we're going to kick into it as you have your lunch there in front of you. So Gene Carberry is going to give us a quick overview of the AI strategy. And I've had a read of it. It's fantastic. It looks at some really interesting things, some great one-liners. I won't steal any from the strategy, Gene. Just I actually loved it, and it's very forward-thinking. So over to you. Thank you.
Now, good afternoon, everybody, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk to you today about Ireland's National AI Strategy, which we launched in the summer. So my name is Jean Carberry, and I head up the digital division of the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment. Hopefully, later on, we'll be able to say the winning Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment, because I believe we have a very good project in the running for the artificial intelligence section. So I'm particularly delighted to be at this event because it's showcasing the huge potential for innovation in the public sector using technologies such as AI, and as I said, that my own department is a finalist is particularly satisfying. So if you're not sure what AI is, don't worry, you're not alone. As I, with my team, worked on developing this strategy, it became very clear that quite a lot of people don't quite know what precisely AI is. And the lines between what is and isn't AI are quite blurred. So the definition we've used in the strategy is machine-based systems with varying levels of autonomy that can, for a given set of human-defined objectives, make predictions, recommendations, or decisions using data. And then machine learning, which is what you probably think of as AI, is a subset of AI that can learn from data sets to self-improve without being explicitly programmed by human programmers. So as the AI who worked with me on this strategy said, it's just algorithms, and he was right. I often think that AI is unfortunate in its name because people tend to think of the killer robots, et cetera, when in fact it is at essence just algorithms. So to put it simply, on the spectrum of digitalization, it is a bit more than automation, but at its essence, it's just programs that can make our life easier. So why should we use AI? It's a powerful tool that can help us solve problems and achieve our goals. It can transform processes and free people up to do more productive work. And again, my own personal dream is to have AI that's going to answer all the PQs and write all the reps so that me and my team can focus on the more interesting policy work. It can help businesses and government to understand customer and client needs. And the CRO project, which is under consideration today, is a good example of that. It'll help us to understand businesses and their needs better. And it can help businesses and government to deliver better products and services. So again, AI is no longer science fiction. It's part of our everyday. It's how supermarkets arrange what they have on their shelves. It's how we book our flights and get the cheapest flight. It's how we get directions on our phone. So the increased use of AI across all facets of life is inevitable. But if Ireland is to really embrace the opportunities that AI offers, it's essential that we're prepared and we have a strategic approach and we've the right policies and necessary safeguards in place in order to ensure responsible development and use of AI. So just to give you a bit of policy context, the AI is a key driver of the National Economic Plan, actually the Economic Recovery Plan now, which was launched also earlier in the summer, which sets out an ambition for Ireland to be at the frontier of technological developments by rapidly adopting new technologies, including AI. And then we are also working on the National Digital Strategy, which we hope to launch before the end of the year. And AI, as one of the most powerful of the digital technologies, will sit within the National Digital Strategy. And of course, there's an EU context, and I probably don't have to tell a lot of people in the audience that more and more the EU are mandating that we use AI for certain things. I believe common agricultural policy schemes now, many of them have to have an AI element, and that is more and more going to be a factor as time goes by. The EU, AI is a major component of the EU strategy for this decade, which they're calling the digital decade. And the EU vision for AI is to build, and this actually is, it's very nice how they've expressed it, an ecosystem of excellence and an ecosystem of trust, which nicely captures the trade-off that we need between properly, and exploiting is a bad word, but leveraging AI, while at the same time having appropriate safeguards in place to protect citizens and people, and also to build trust in what is an exciting but also at times a bit frightening technology. So our strategy was influenced by the EU strategy, but it's also tailored to the specifics of the Irish context. So we've called our strategy AI Here for Good, and we came up with that name because it both recognises the fact that, like King Canute, we can't turn back the tide. AI is coming, and it's for us now to embrace it and leverage all the opportunities it offers. But also that it is also a good thing and has a potential as being a force for good if, again, it's managed in the right way. So our vision is that Ireland will be an international leader in using AI to the benefit of our population through a people-centred, ethical approach to AI development, adoption and use. And the ethical approach is central to this, and it has informed everything in the strategy. And I think certainly for the public sector reform people and for everybody here, if we are to use AI, it's essential that we can trust it and that we have the appropriate safeguards in place. So Ireland, AI Here for Good, Ireland's first national AI strategy, sets out our vision, the key principles that will guide us, and the actions we will take to further strengthen our AI ecosystem. So I've condensed the rest of my presentation into this one slide. We have structured the strategy in 8 strands because of the fact that this is so complex and cross-cutting. However, those 8 strands can be neatly categorized in 3 categories. The first is building public trust. The second is leveraging AI for economic and societal benefit. And then the third is the enablers for AI. So we've put the building public trust at the start of the strategy because it is key if we are to have widespread adoption of AI. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, there is a lot of fear in public narrative around AI. It is unfortunate in its name that there's a lot of preconceived notions based on Hollywood images, etc. In fact, when I became responsible for the AI strategy, my son immediately started talking about RoboCop and the Terminator. So after he said, "Why on earth are they making you responsible for AI, ma'am?" So our first strand is where we set out the challenges, the potential for bias, the various different pitfalls that Ireland doesn't want to fall into as we encourage widespread adoption of AI. And one of our key actions, which we hope to implement later this quarter, is to appoint an AI ambassador who will go out on behalf of government and spread the message around how we will use AI as a force for good, and talk and listen to people and begin a public conversation around the potential of AI. The second strand, governing for trustworthy AI, talks about the 3 layers of governance that we will put in place to ensure that the necessary safeguards are in place. So there's going to be a robust regulatory framework is currently being negotiated at EU level. which will balance the need for innovation with the need for trust and safeguards. We are also at a domestic level looking at existing legislation to see what gaps are in place that need to be filled to reflect the newness of AI technology and lacuna that may have come up. The other two layers of governance are, firstly, standards and certification. So we've put in place a top team which is being coordinated by the NSAI to develop a comprehensive set of standards for adoption of AI, and I believe they will be reporting sometime early next year, and we will work to implement their recommendations. And then finally, we want to promulgate ethical standards, and we're very fortunate, although he's not in the room right now, that Barry O'Sullivan, who's one of our judges, is one of the acknowledged EU experts in this area, and indeed chaired the EU high-level group which established the EU ethical framework for AI. So the second category is basically how do we leverage AI and how do we get benefit? And so this splits into two parts, the private sector and the public sector. So obviously I'd like the public sector to win, which is why I'm delighted to see events like this and to see the adoption of AI being prioritized by the Public Service Innovation Team. But with my work hat on, my job is to drive adoption of AI by Irish businesses. So that's strand 3. So PwC have estimated that the application of AI could double economic growth in Ireland by 2035. So government wants to help businesses to take advantage of the opportunities of AI to drive resilience and to drive our economic recovery. So we've conceptualized essentially the big economic benefits as we see it will actually come from widespread adoption by rank and file SMEs across the country. So we've conceptualized the journey we want them to go on as the AI development ladder. So it begins with awareness. Then after that, it's opportunities to explore and connect. Then it's experimentation and piloting what AI can do. And then finally, the final step has to be implementation. So while we do acknowledge that most AI applications will be purchased off the shelf rather than being people in white coats developing algorithms in your local garage or beauty salon, at the same time, we want businesses to recognize that it is a journey, that if they buy this software today, it may end up on their shelf. There's a lot of preparation that has to happen before the implementation begins. And that's why we're working with the enterprise agencies, with the local enterprise offices, to develop a coherent program to drive this adoption. We're also putting in place 4 European digital innovation hubs, of which one will be an AI innovation hub. And that will give SMEs and other businesses, and indeed the public sector, opportunities to explore AI, to use demonstrators, and to get advice and assistance, expert advice and assistance. And then finally, of course, there's money. So we're going to have a series of grants and loan schemes to help businesses in acquiring and implementing the AI. That's all ahead of us. But this is all set out in the strategy. Then in the public sector, as we've seen today, there are huge opportunities to use AI as a tool to transform the way that we deliver public services. So some great examples here today. Department of Agriculture being able to use AI in the fight against bovine TB. The Department of Agriculture also using AI to monitor for many of its schemes. Revenue commissioners are using AI in interacting with their customers. And then in the strategy, we have a lovely example of how Dublin Corporation are using AI in their Smart City initiative. So Barry Lowry and the GovTech team, together with the people in public service innovation, will continue to drive this. And again, they will be using some of the infrastructure, including the digital hubs, in that journey. And so we're looking forward to seeing great strides on that in the future. So finally, I'll hop to enablers for AI. So we've divided these into three subsets. One is a strong AI innovation ecosystem. And I have to say, this is already a strength for Ireland. And indeed, we just used the strategic document to put in highlights what a strong innovation ecosystem we have. So there are some strategic actions there, but already a lot of the innovation spade work has been done. The challenge now is in adoption and widespread use of AI. Strand 6 is around education, skills and talent, and it also addresses another widespread fear, which is that a lot of jobs may become obsolete because of AI. So we talk in the strategy about the supports we'll put in place, the need for retraining, upskilling, and ensuring that there is social coherence around this disruptive journey that we are undertaking. And again, this underscores the need for a strategic approach rather than just letting AI happen to us. We're going to control it, and we're going to make sure that our people and our workforce are ready to make the most of it. And then finally, data. In the infrastructure side, data is the fuel of AI. And so we have a large part of this chapter is around how we can make data available to businesses and to the public sector in order to properly innovate and use AI. We also talk about the need for resources like supercomputers and broadband, etc. So all the different hardware type things that need to be in place in order for this successful adoption of AI. And again, we'll be working very closely with Barry and his team in OGCIO and across government to ensure that all this infrastructure continues to be built on and is in place. So unfortunately, it's really easy and great to do a strategy. It's really hard to implement it. So the final slide is around what we're putting in place for the implementation. So the National Digital Strategy, which I mentioned earlier and which will be finalised at the end of this quarter, will have an implementation structure to drive and oversee Ireland's digital transition, and the whole of government aspects to the AI strategy will be overseen by this implementation infrastructure. However, my department has our own implementation bodies in place, or we're working to put them in place for the enterprise strand. So we're establishing an enterprise digital advisory board which will work with us and advise government on ensuring that we have a programme for enterprise that is fit for purpose, to help us in raising awareness among businesses of the potential of AI and of the resources available to them, and to help us in developing a national AI cluster to drive collaboration and spillover between multinationals and SMEs. And that is one huge strategic benefit that we have in Ireland, the presence of these state-of-the-art multinational companies. And I just see I'm over time, so I might whiz down and say European Digital Innovation Hubs and the AI Ambassador are the other two key things that we hope to put in place late this year or early next year. So I'm going to wrap up now, and I can take any questions.